All right, I am Stephanie Rising with the Rising Effect. It is Ask Me Anything once again, and just to keep everything kosher and in proper compliance, I'm going to have my guest today introduce herself.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. My other favorite, Stephanie. I'm Stephanie Kidder. I'm the co-owner of Empower Financial Group, where we do retirement planning strategies, anything from, how do I budget? I just started a job to what's my exit strategy when I've been working, however many years you've been in the workforce. We specialize, like I said, in retirement income strategies.
Awesome. All right, and I have my little list of questions here because retirement strategies it's a big deal for small business owners. The arc of most businesses is you're scratching and clawing just to get your income going, and then you get some momentum, and then all of a sudden you reach this point with your business where you have a new normal and you actually have some disposable income and you start thinking about retirement planning and saving, and you're not just in scratch and claw mode anymore. And so when people find themselves at this stage of the business, it's really important that they start thinking about their future. So I have a bunch of questions around that. The first one is for people who feel overwhelmed talking about their finances, which is super common, or if they think that it's impossible to save for retirement, where can they start?
Yeah, perfect. That's a great question. I start everything from an educational perspective. I think it's important that we teach people financial literacy 101. So that's where I want to start is here's what money means. Here's what some of the common words and phrases are. Here's what you can do with your money and why, so that we can educate so that they can make then informed financial decisions. So we're always going to start from a ground level floor of education.
Mm-hmm.
And usually 99.9% of the time, and I don't care if you're somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck or somebody who's running a $1 million business and makes a ton of money, it's starting with a budget, right?
Yeah.
How much do you make? How much do you bring home? And how much does it cost you to live the way you live right now? Don't amend it. Don't make changes. Don't shift numbers around for my benefit. Like, what's real? What are what do you spend, right? Because how can you make an informed financial decision about what you want to be doing? Where should you be putting money if you don't even know what your capacity is to do it?
Yes, and it's funny that you bring this up because just in the last month, I've been working on operating budgets with several clients because we needed to have a sobering moment about where the money is going and does every dollar have a job, right? I've had many money mentors over the years tell me the same thing. Every dollar needs to have a job.
Right.
And it can be very sobering putting a budget together, and it's not always a fun activity, but once you know exactly where your money is going, for good or for ill, you come from a place of empowerment. You're not just guessing, or you're not just making assumptions. You're making really informed decisions about what's going on. And as business owners, that's an important place to come from. So I'm really glad that you brought up the budgeting. And that does that leads me to my next question. You and I both serve small business owners. In their budget, what is the importance of budgeting for retirement benefits as a tool for attracting and retaining good employees? I mean, we know that is a recruitment and retention tool, but again, for people who think, well, I can't really afford to do that, or my company isn't big enough to pick up the tab for funding, what are some of the options that are out there? Knowing you're not giving particular advice, you would have to speak with someone, in order to actually give them guidance. But in general, what are some of the avenues available to any size business around retirement benefits?
Well, in general, is it safe to assume that all of the business clients that you work with pay taxes in some way?
Yes.
Okay. So there are particular types of benefits that can be offered to clients where when the employer is funding them, it's a
Mhm.
tax write-off to the business, right? So it's a win-win because it's a benefit to the business owner from a tax perspective, but it's also something that's a benefit to the employee because it's a not a dollar in their paycheck kind of benefit, but it's whatever, it's life insurance, it's short, long-term disability, it's a retirement account, something of those natures. Again, it would depend on what it is and how it's set up in the structure of the business, but there are always things to consider that would be an added benefit to both the employer and the employee.
And as you're describing that, like there is some avenue to like offer employees this benefit, and like the importance of it and figuring out a way to afford it. I was looking at an article. Actually, Jen Hagar shared this with us, and I'm going to have Jen on later in the year to share more about health insurance. But um, in the top 10 benefits that people are looking for, like numbers 6 through 10 are all some form of health insurance, but in the top 5
Mm-hmm,
is retirement.
mm-hmm.
That is, they're more conscious of what they're doing with their money, and especially millennials, the largest living workforce now.
Yep.
They're less concerned about stuff, and they are more concerned about their financial freedom.
Yep.
And so saving for the future is something that actually excites them, and they're really interested in it. So for companies to stay relevant to the largest workforce, you got to figure this one out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. And it's teaching them, and it's teaching the employees, well, it's teaching the employees and the employers both. What does it mean when you give me a 4% match? What does that mean?
yes,
And how does that benefit me? And so we often have to teach the employees, like, they're giving you free money. If you do this, they will give you that. You should
yeah,
do that all day. Because they don't really, and they're like, oh, well, I didn't really understand that. Thank you for explaining it. I mean, I hear that all the time.
yeah.
So it's just kind of teaching not only the business owner, but having the business owner allow me to come in and teach their employees so that the employees understand the value of the benefits that they're getting.
And that education, like you coming in and advocating for them in that way, is in and of itself a benefit, because
Absolutely.
it shows the employees that the employer really cares about their financial stability, their financial literacy, and
Mhm.
that level of emotional investment in your employees is as valuable as anything else. Like there's no downside
Right.
to doing financial planning as a company.
Right. And it doesn't cost any of them, either of them, anything for me
Right.
to come talk. I'm not a fee-based advisor. So like there's no downside to that because I am going to come and do this for nothing.
Yeah.
Now, if they choose to work with me, that's how I get paid. But me giving them the information is because I find it valuable to have community members that are financially empowered. I want to do it.
Yeah. And coming from a place of empowerment and not fear
Mhm.
is kind of one of the next things that I wanted to get into in our conversation, because money is so emotional. It means a lot of people are making decisions based off of fear and not logic and not good information. So, what is the biggest mistake that you see people make around money?
Reacting to things that they see online or in the media or on the news or on social media, like just, or my
Yeah.
uncle did this or my grandma did that. Like I think what people don't understand is that every person's financial situation is unique, right?
Mhm.
You've got financial DNA, if you will, and
Mhm.
and what your mom does or what your grandpa does, what the guy on YouTube does, may or may not necessarily apply to you. It may actually be harmful to you for X, Y, and Z reasons. And so
Yeah.
when you're just taking those generalities, that can really put a damper in somebody's whole frame. And I just think that they don't know what they don't know. Um, and they're afraid to ask because they think, I don't make enough money. I don't have enough money. I don't want to pay somebody to get this information. And so they just don't. And so what I find is, people are just kind of randomly, just kind of blindly chucking money at things. And most of those things are, if they're saving at all, they're saving in their 401k at work, or they're not saving. It's usually one of those two things. And there's usually not a lot else going on. And so, earlier you were talking about, all your money doesn't have the same job. Yeah, it doesn't. That's absolutely correct. Tools in a toolbox, right? And so
Yep.
what's the job of these dollars versus what's the job of these dollars? They don't live in the same place. They're not invested in the same way. They may not be invested at all. Just depends. But how do you know what that means until you understand the fundamentals of money and where you should be putting it and why?
Yeah. And I think part of it also kind of goes hand in glove with not just maturing as a business leader, but also maturing as a person. You have to make yourself vulnerable enough to raise your hand and say, I really don't know what the hell I'm doing here and I need help.
Yeah.
If you just if you shame yourself and say, well, I should know better and I should understand this, and you just wind up shooting on yourself, then you go into reaction mode instead of coming from a place of genuine knowledge and empowerment. And one of those is not going to serve you and one is. And, it's up to people to choose which path they want to go down. But I can certainly understand, I am reformed when it comes to money.
Nice.
So I speak as
Same.
someone who was once very bad with their money, and now it's like, oh, it's not this scary thing. If I have a good little toolkit, like you were saying, and I can understand the ramifications of it, I make better choices, and I still get what I want at the end of the day. But maybe it takes a little more time, or I have to use avenues that I couldn't have created by myself because I now ask for help.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's where I'm valuable is I understand I'm reformed financial, knowledge too. Like I didn't know what I didn't know either. Right.
Yeah.
And so now that I have it, like I want to share it and I want other people to have it. But I also understand the fear and the uncertainty and the shame that comes from not knowing it. Yeah. And I think where my strength is that I really work hard to take an educational approach to things and not a non-judgmental conversation and pointing out like, look, if you've never done a budget, this process that I'm about to take you through, it's probably going to suck. Right? Yeah. And you're not going to love me and you're not going to love yourself. That may be true. Right. Yeah. But I promise you this, and I promise you this because I've heard other people, like my clients, tell me this on the backside. That was the worst experience I've ever done in my life. But when it was done, I felt so much better because now I can see what I'm doing and now I can make decisions. Whereas before I was just blindly doing things and just kind of poking and hoping that things were going to work out. I feel so much better. And I think, going back to your, where should you start? Like that's it. And it's putting yourself in an uncomfortable spot when you haven't done it. It's like going to the gym for the first time, right?
Yeah.
If you've never worked out and you go to the gym and you just, right? What's day 2 look like? You're dying, right? But if you
don't want to go back.
Yes, and you never want to do it again. But if you just kind of have a process and you slowly eat one bite of the animal at a time, right? Yeah. And you work your way through it. Yeah, you've got some aches and your pains and some soreness, but pretty soon you start building the muscle, right? We're just trying to build the financial muscle. It's no different.
Yeah. And once you have a financial muscle, it feels good to flex it.
Yes. Then you get to go in the mirror and like, yeah, look at me.
Yeah. It's like, oh, my statement just came. I'm at it. Like I've done some serious adulting. This feels good.
And when you hear everyone else in the world freaking out because they heard a thing on the news or a thing on social media, you're like, I got this.
Yeah, I think if more people focused on just playing the law of averages, they'd be so much better off. If you're following it off and on all throughout the day over day, you're just going to give yourself anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sitting here looking at the stock market every minute of the day. I don't want that job. That's a stockbroker. I don't want that.
Yeah,
Right.
you're playing the long game.
It's a long-term strategy, what we're trying to build, what we're
Yeah.
trying to create. Yep.
So kind of along those lines, like every once in a while, I hear grumbles that you can't trust the system. You can't trust the market and you can't trust investments and all you can trust is cold hard cash. So for people who just have their little safe of money and they don't have a retirement strategy, they're just going to stockpile like Scrooge McDuck. What do you tell these people?
What's the inflation rate been lately?
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
So you go back to, 2021, and years prior to that, inflation, which is just, if you don't know, inflation is just the value of money decreasing over time because the cost of goods and services increases, right?
Mhm.
And so inflation was hovering around 2.5%. It got as high as like 8, 9%. And right now we're around 6-ish as we speak in the end of April. If your money isn't earning what the inflation rate is, technically you're losing money, right?
Mhm.
Because you're losing buying power. So if you've got cash sitting in your mattress or buried in your backyard or wherever you stash it,
Yeah.
technically that those dollars have no opportunity to keep up with the inflation rate.
So it goes back to you're making decisions based on fear and not facts.
Yeah. Yeah. And should you have some money in cash? Yes, absolutely. Is it the same for everyone? No, it definitely is not.
Yeah.
What do you need the cash for? There's time frames wrapped around money. And again, it's different for different people. So my answer is, well, it depends on how much you should have. But you know, I think there's a lot of driving of fear in all aspects, not just finance and money, but just everywhere out there. We don't have to look very far to find something to be afraid of.
Yeah.
And if we want to buy into that always about everything, then you're just living in this constant state of fear. But do we know what's going to happen tomorrow in the market or in the world or in anything? No, but we can look at what has happened in the past and how it's been dealt with, and we have a little bit of historical knowledge, and really that's when you're talking about money and finance, like that's kind of where we're at, you know.
And I think, and you shared this with us not too long ago. Like if you look at any 10-year slice of the market going back, what, 100 years or so?
Well, yeah, but almost 100 years. Yeah.
Almost 100 years. What on average, there's like 2 or 3 underperforming years, but the year immediately following a rough economic year, there's always a rebound. And so on average, you're getting a 10% return by being invested in the market. And I know you can neither confirm nor deny that in order to be in compliance.
Yeah.
But if you look at, like you said, historical pattern, you're going to be ahead of the game having a retirement strategy and not just stockpiling cash because you're afraid of a bad year.
Right. Or chasing the shiny new object, right?
Yeah, Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So to your point, what you were referring to is I just did this. So these numbers are pretty accurate, and when you can Google it and fact check me, the last 10 years of time, and on average, there are in a 10-year time frame, 70% of the time the market is up, 30% of the time the market is down.
Mhm.
Well, in the last 10 years, that is exactly what happened. There were 3 down years and 7 up years.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, every year after or following a down year was a rebound. And in the last 10 years, I think this is where the math is. I did the average on S&P 500 was like 12.2% on average in those 10 years. So
Yeah.
I'm just looking backwards at what happened. And you can take any 10-year chunk though, and
And
do
that would
that
be the
same
case.
thing, and it's around-ish somewhere in that range, right? So if you're trying to chase the shiny object, sure, you're going to take on some more risk and you may or may not be successful. But if you're playing the long game, we can kind of look at historical data and go, yeah, well, that's about what we can expect.
Yeah. So it's like we have the no investors, and then we have the really high risk people. And really
Mhm.
what you're looking for is the Goldilocks middle.
Yeah. Well, and I think the two extremes, uh, don't, I think there's probably a degree of them there that are that way or feel that way because they have a lack of knowledge and understanding. There are
Yeah.
certainly going to be the outliers who are just like, nope, super conservative, don't want to put anything in the bet, not doing it. And I'm going to take all the risk I want. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to chase the shiny object. There are those people, but I think my experience has been those that are afraid of it and don't have some sort of strategy already that they're employing. They're doing what they're doing on a whim, and they don't really know why they're doing it, or they're doing it, like I said earlier, because this is what my dad did, or this is what my grandpa told me. Or if you're
Yeah.
investing the same way that your grandpa does, you might have a problem.
Yeah.
There might be some issue there for you. I mean, maybe not, but probably.
Better
um
to ask questions though.
yeah, yeah, because
Yeah.
again, everybody's financial DNA is different.
Yeah.
It's not just putting money into a specific thing. It is, why am I putting it there? How does that benefit my specific situation? Am I married? Am I single? Do I have kids? Do I not have kids? Do I own a house? Do I rent? Is there a potential that I might have to take care of my aging parents? And how am I going to do that? Um,
Yeah.
there's so many variables that, that when I'm sitting down with a potential client, where I'm asking these questions, what are the things that might trip you up, so that we can try and plan and mitigate for those things if and when they happen. If they don't happen, okay, cool, then we shift the money around. But what if they do?
Yeah.
Right.
And if
And
your
so,
circumstances differ from your family or your friends,
mhm,
or, whatever
yeah,
the advice du jour is,
right.
are you taking that into consideration?
Yeah, because the online experts, that are on YouTube or TikTok or wherever they are, like talking about things at random, they're probably not licensed, because if they were, they wouldn't be, doing those things. But
Yeah.
it's a generality. Like, it's not that simple. The the
Yeah.
the framework and the process can be simplified. But the variables of someone's specifics are always going to be different.
So that leads me to my last question. Is there anything that we haven't already covered, um, in answer to this? Like, what do you wish people had a better understanding around when it comes to financial planning or just the finance industry?
Yeah. I wish that people weren't afraid of it. I wish that they would seek the advice so that they can start planning appropriately for themselves.
Yeah.
We always have these things that, like, they're important, but they're not urgent.
Yeah.
I would argue, like, it's important and it's urgent, because the longer you wait, the less flexibility that you have, the more expensive it might potentially be for you to do things, from a savings perspective. You have more options. It's probably better to say it this way. You have more options, um, the earlier you start. And the earlier you start, there's a very strong likelihood that we're not trying to fix mistakes,
Yeah.
debt, whatever. We're not trying to dig our way out of a debt situation that's untenable. We can just start from ground zero and move forward. And I think that mantra of, well, I don't have any money, I don't need to be thinking about this yet, is, I would argue, is absolutely wrong. When
Yeah.
you don't have money and you're about to, is the exact right time. Um,
Yeah.
because before you start messing it up, let's lay a framework. Let's get a budget going. Let's figure out, what can you afford, not what you can qualify for. Those are two different things, right?
Yeah.
What can
And
you
what kind
afford?
of choices are you making? I mean,
Mhm.
I've had conversations with some clients, and you just kind of help them, you're gently peeling the onion,
Yeah,
because it starts with, I can't afford to do any retirement planning. And you start peeling and you learn what their Starbucks and their DoorDash
yeah,
spend is every month. And it's like, you may have a little more wiggle room to at least begin the habit of savings than you're
right.
giving yourself credit for. It comes
Absolutely.
down to choices.
Absolutely. It always is choices. And I don't care who you are, and I don't care how much you make or don't make. It is always about choices.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to make those choices if we don't know where we are. You know, if you're
Yeah.
sitting here looking at a $500,000 house on a $50,000 salary, like, sure, you can qualify for that, but can you afford it? No, probably not.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's, well, how can we work toward that? What does that look like? You may have to shift your time, your time schedule here, and you may have to shift some of the activities that you're doing. But I think a lot of my job, I'm like, I'm teaching you about finances, but I'm also like a marriage counselor. I am a therapist. You know, I'm a behavior modification specialist. Like it's all about choices and habits.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know what is what you want, you know, in relationship to the goals you're trying to achieve? How do you know what that is if you don't know where you are?
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, going back to your question of, you know, where do I start and how do I work myself out of this? It's just do it. We're going to
The
go back to
fundamental. Yeah.
do it, right? Find someone that you trust. Find somebody that is actually licensed and knows what they're talking about, not YouTube and TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, go seek that advice. It's very relationship driven. So find the person that you vibe with, and who knows what they're doing. Have them take you through their process. Make sure it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, they're not the right person, and that's okay. There's a zillion of us out there. Go find the one that is.
Yeah.
But start, you know, get going. Again, I'm going to use the gym analogy. Like, you're not going to get more fit just thinking about getting fit.
You got to put in the reps.
You gotta go to the gym. Yeah.
Yep. Well,
So,
I really appreciate you answering these questions and talking with me because, you know, I work exclusively with small business owners, and so many of us went into business for ourselves because we wanted the autonomy. And at some point, we have to factor in true financial freedom in the autonomy equation. And this is a really, really big variable in that equation. So thank you for answering these questions and sharing this information with us and being compassionate about all of our money phobia.
yes. Well, thank you for asking me pointed and relevant questions and giving me the opportunity to answer them. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Kidder. I am going to drop your contact information in with the posts that will go along with this video. And I highly recommend to anyone that they get in touch with you and start their money journey on the right foot. So thanks again for all the good information. Much appreciated.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you.
All right. See you soon.
See ya.
Bye.